The docking bay of Haven Station buzzed with its usual chaos, cargo haulers wheeling past, alien traders haggling in a dozen languages, and the constant hum of atmospheric processors working overtime to keep the air breathable. Jackson Mercer stood at the threshold of the transport ship, his weathered hands gripping the doorframe as he stared into the familiar, yet foreign world of his childhood home. 7 years. 7 years since he'd fled this place in shame, carrying nothing but the weight of his mother's disgrace and the echo of whispered accusations. Now, at 32, he was back, though he wasn't entirely sure why. Perhaps it was the letter from the station administrator, mentioning his mother's memorial plaque. Perhaps it was the gnawing emptiness that had followed him across 3-star systems. Or perhaps it was simply time to face the ghosts that had haunted him for too long. The station hadn't changed much. The same flickering holo advertisements cast their garish light across the metal walls. The same mixture of recycled air and industrial lubricants filled his lungs. The same sense of barely controlled chaos permeated everything. But as Jackson stepped onto the platform, something felt different. The stairs, he remembered those accusing glances that had followed him everywhere. After his mother's scandal were absent, most people didn't recognize him anymore. Time had a way of softening memories, even painful ones. He made his way through the crowd, his engineers automatically cataloging the station's many repairs and upgrades. New atmospheric filters, improved artificial gravity generators, enhanced communications rays. Progress, it seemed, had not stopped simply because his world had fallen apart. The thought brought a bitter smile to his lips. "Excuse me," a voice called from behind him, soft and melodious in a way that made him pause. "Are you hurt?" Jackson turned, expecting to see another human, but instead found himself face to face with an Etherian. She was tall and graceful, with the characteristic pale blue skin of her people that seemed to glow faintly under the station's artificial lights. Her silver hair was woven with tiny luminescent threads that caught the light like captured starlight. But it was her eyes that truly stopped him, deep violet pools that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages and the warmth of a summer dawn. "I'm fine," he replied automatically, though he realized he'd been unconsciously favoring his left leg. An old injury from his mining days on Kepler 440b had been acting up during the long journey. The Etherian tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You're carrying pain," she said simply. "Physical and otherwise. I'm Vera Stormwind, a healer here on the station. Please, let me help." Jackson's first instinct was to refuse. In his experience, kindness from strangers, especially alien strangers, usually came with strings attached. But something in Vera's demeanor stopped him. There was no calculation in her expression, no hidden agenda, just genuine concern for a fellow being's welfare. "I appreciate the offer," he said carefully, "but I'm not sure I can afford your services. I'm just passing through." Vera's laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Healing isn't about payment, Jackson Mercer. It's about need." He started at the sound of his name. "How did you? Your mother spoke of you often," Vera said softly. "She was proud of you, you know." Even at the end, the words hit him like a physical blow. His mother had died 3 years ago, alone in a medical facility on the station's outer ring. He'd been too ashamed to return for her funeral, too afraid of the judgment he'd face. The guilt had been eating at him ever since. "You knew her?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Elena was my friend," Vera replied. "She spoke of you constantly, your intelligence, your compassion, your gift for fixing things that others had given up on. She never blamed you for leaving, Jackson. She understood." Tears threatened to spill from his eyes, but he blinked them back. "She was a thief," he said bitterly. "She disgraced our family name, brought shame to everyone who knew us." What was there to be proud of? Vera's expression softened with something that might have been pity, but felt more like understanding. "Is that truly what you believe? That your mother was nothing more than a common criminal?" "The evidence was clear," Jackson said. "She was caught stealing medical supplies from the hospital. The security footage showed everything. She confessed to it all." "And did you ever wonder why she stole those supplies?" Vera asked gently. Jackson opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. In truth, he'd been so devastated by the scandal, so overwhelmed by the shame of it all, that he'd never really questioned his mother's motives. She'd stolen, been caught, and confessed. The why had seemed irrelevant compared to the crushing weight of public humiliation. "Come," Vera said, extending her hand. "Let me tend to your injury, and I'll tell you about your mother, the real Elena Mercer, not the woman the news feeds made her out to be." Against his better judgment, Jackson found himself following Vera through the station's corridors. She led him to a small clinic in the civilian quarter, a modest space filled with the soft hum of medical equipment and the gentle scent of healing herbs. The walls were decorated with star charts and botanical illustrations, giving the place a warm, lived-in feel that was surprisingly comforting. "Sit," Vera instructed, gesturing to an examination table, "and tell me about your leg." As Jackson settled onto the table, he found himself studying Vera more closely. She moved with the fluid grace characteristic of her people, but there was something else in her movements, a practiced efficiency that spoke of years of experience. Her hands, when she began examining his leg, were warm and sure, radiating a gentle energy that seemed to ease his pain even before she began her work. "Mining accident," he explained as she worked. "Happened 5 years ago on Kepler 440b. A support beam gave way during a tunnel collapse. I was lucky to get out with just a damaged knee." Vera's hands glowed with a soft blue light as she worked, the healing energy of her people flowing into his injured joint. "You've been ignoring this for too long," she said, her voice carrying a note of gentle reproach. "The scar tissue has been building up, restricting your movement. This should have been treated properly years ago. Medical care is expensive when you're working the outer rim." Jackson replied with a shrug. "I made do. Your mother would have been furious," Vera said, her healing light pulsing brighter. "She always said you were too stubborn for your own good, that you'd rather suffer in silence than ask for help." As the healing energy worked its way through his leg, Jackson felt something else, a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The constant ache that had been his companion for so long began to fade, replaced by a warmth that seemed to spread through his entire body. She used to volunteer at the free clinic. Vera continued as she worked, 3 days a week, helping people who couldn't afford proper medical care. Humans, Etherians, Centaurians, it didn't matter to her. She saw need, and she tried to fill it. "That doesn't explain why she stole," Jackson said, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Doesn't it?" Vera asked, her violet eyes meeting his. "The free clinic was always short on supplies. The station administrators promised funding that never came. People were dying, Jackson. Children were dying. And your mother, she couldn't stand by and do nothing." The healing light faded as Vera finished her work, but the warmth remained. Jackson flexed his leg experimentally, marveling at the absence of pain. "So she stole to help people. She took what she needed to save lives," Vera corrected. "And when she was caught, she confessed immediately. She could have fought the charges, could have exposed the corruption and negligence that led to the shortages in the first place. But she knew that would have meant months of legal proceedings, while people continued to suffer, so she accepted responsibility, accepted the shame, and hoped that her sacrifice would at least draw attention to the problem." Jackson sat in silence for a long moment, processing this new information. His mother, the woman he'd seen as a source of shame and disgrace, had been a hero. She'd sacrificed her reputation, her freedom, even her relationship with her son, to save the lives of strangers. "Why didn't she tell me?" he asked finally. "Because she knew you," Vera said simply. "She knew you'd try to help, try to fix things, and she knew that would have destroyed you too. So she bore the burden alone, as she always did." A tear rolled down Jackson's cheek, and this time he didn't bother to wipe it away. "I abandoned her," he whispered. "I left her to face it all alone." "You were protecting yourself," Vera said, her voice gentle but firm. She understood that. She wanted you to have a life free from the shadow of her choices. "That's what mothers do, Jackson. They sacrifice so their children can soar." As Jackson looked into Vera's compassionate eyes, he felt something shift inside him. The shame and anger that had consumed him for so long began to crack, revealing something Underneath not just grief for his mother, but a spark of the man he'd once been. The man his mother had believed he could become. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For healing me, for telling me the truth." Vera smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise over an alien horizon. "Your mother's story isn't over, Jackson. She lives on in the people she saved, in the changes her sacrifice brought about. And she lives on in you. The question is, what will you do with that legacy?" As Jackson left. 3 days had passed since Jackson's reunion with the truth about his mother, and Haven Station felt different to him now. Where once he'd seen only reminders of shame, he now noticed the subtle improvements his mother's sacrifice had brought about. The free clinic had expanded, the medical supplies were more abundant, and there was a memorial garden where people of all species came to remember those who had given their lives for others. But it was thoughts of Vera that occupied most of his mind, her gentle touch, her compassionate eyes. The way she'd spoken about his mother with such reverence, it all stirred something within him that he'd thought long dead. He found himself walking past her clinic more often than necessary, hoping for another glimpse of her silver hair catching the artificial starlight. On this particular morning, he was making his way to the engineering sector where he'd managed to secure temporary work when raised voices caught his attention. Near the main plaza, a crowd had gathered around of figures engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion. As Jackson drew closer, his heart sank. One of the figures was Vera, her usual calm demeanor strained as she faced off against Counselor Harwick, a pompous human politician known for his anti-alien rhetoric. "Completely inappropriate for someone of your standing to be consorting with humans," Harwick was saying, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "The Etherian Council has made their position quite clear on this matter. My healing practices are my own concern," Vera replied, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. "I treat all beings equally, regardless of species. That is the way of my people, your people." "Yes," Harwick sneered, "but not his people." He gestured toward the crowd, his gaze landing directly on Jackson. "Especially not the son of a convicted criminal." The words hit Jackson like a physical blow. But this time, instead of shame, he felt anger rising in his chest. He stepped forward, pushing through the crowd until he stood beside Vera. "Is there a problem here, Counselor?" Harwick's smile was predatory. Well, Jackson Mercer returns to the scene of his family's disgrace. How fitting that you'd be drawn to this situation." "What situation would that be?" Jackson asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "This Etherian has been treating humans at her clinic," Harwick explained, as if discussing something distasteful. "The Etherian Council has expressed concern about such intimate contact between our species. They feel it sets a dangerous precedent." Jackson looked at Vera, noting the way her luminescent skin had dimmed slightly, a sign of distress among her people. "Vera helps anyone who needs it," he said firmly. "That's what healers do, indeed." Came a new voice from behind them. The crowd parted to reveal Elder Nimter, an ancient Etherian whose presence commanded immediate respect. His skin was nearly translucent with age, and the ceremonial robes he wore seemed to shimmer with their own inner light, which is precisely why young Vera's behavior is so troubling. Vera's shoulders sagged slightly. "Elder Nimter, I didn't expect." "No, I imagine you didn't," the elder interrupted, his voice carrying centuries of authority. "Child, your gifts are meant for our people. The healing light that flows through you is sacred, not to be squandered on lesser beings." "Lesser beings?" Jackson stepped forward, his anger flaring. "You're talking about people, living, breathing, people who deserve the same care and compassion as anyone else." Elder Nimter's ancient eyes fixed on Jackson with cold disdain. "You are the spawn of a thief and a criminal. Your opinion carries no weight here." The words stung, but Jackson stood his ground. "My mother gave her life to help people, all people. If that makes her a criminal in your eyes, then I'm proud to be her son." "Enough." Vera's voice cut through the tension like a blade. The healing light within her flared suddenly, bright enough to make everyone in the plaza shield their eyes. When it faded, she stood straighter, her violet eyes blazing with determination. "Elder Nimter, with all due respect, My healing gifts were given to me by the universe itself. They don't belong to any one species or council. They belong to those who need them, Vera. Elder Nimder's voice carried a warning. You are walking a dangerous path. Association with humans, especially this human, will only bring you pain and dishonor. His kind cannot be trusted. His kind, Vera laughed, but there was no humor in it. You speak as if you know humans, Elder, but when did you last actually speak to one? When did you last see beyond your own prejudices? I have lived for 8 centuries, child. Nimder replied coldly. I have seen empires rise and fall, species, war and make peace. Humans are ambitious, destructive, short-sighted. They take what they want and justify it later. Just look at this one's mother. You know nothing about my mother, Jackson said, his voice low and dangerous. She sacrificed everything to save lives, your lives included, if any Etherians had needed. Those medical supplies, sacrifice. Counselor Harwick laughed harshly. She was a thief, pure and simple, and now her son comes crawling back, no doubt looking for another innocent alien to manipulate. That was too much. Jackson lunged forward, but Vera's hand on his arm stopped him. Her touch was warm, calming, but he could feel the tension in her fingers. Stop, she said quietly. This isn't the way. Elder Nimder observed their interaction with growing disapproval. You see how they affect you, child. Already you defend this human's violence, excuse his anger. This is exactly what the council feared. The council fears what they don't understand. Vera replied. They see connection and call it contamination. They see compassion and call it weakness. We see wisdom. Nimder's voice boomed across the plaza. We see the preservation of our people's purity, our sacred traditions. You would throw all of that away for what? The fleeting affection of a human male. Vera's skin flushed deeper blue, the Etherian equivalent of a blush. This isn't about affection. This is about doing what's right. But Jackson could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. The way she pulled slightly away from him, the elder's words were having their intended effect, driving a wedge between them with surgical precision. The council has made a decision, Nimder announced. You will cease treating humans immediately and return to the Etherian quarter. Your healing gifts will be restricted to your own people, as they should be. And if I refuse, Vera asked, though her voice had lost some of its earlier fire, then you will be stripped of your position and exiled from Etherian society. Nimder replied without hesitation. You will become something worse than human. You will become nothing. The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Jackson watched. As Vera struggled with the impossible choice before her, he could see the pain in her eyes. The war between her convictions and her loyalty to her people. Vera, he said softly, you don't have to choose now. Take time to think. No, she interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to consider what's best for everyone. Counselor Harwick smiled triumphantly. A wise decision. I trust we won't see any more of this inappropriate behavior. As the crowd began to disperse, Jackson found himself standing alone with Vera in the now empty plaza. The silence between them stretched uncomfortably, filled with unspoken words and unfulfilled possibilities. I'm sorry, she said finally, not meeting his eyes. I never meant for this to become so complicated. It doesn't have to be, Jackson replied, reaching out to touch her arm. She flinched away from his touch, and the small rejection cut deeper than any of the harsh words that had been spoken, doesn't it? Vera looked at him then, and he could see tears glistening in her violet eyes. My people think I'm betraying everything they stand for. Your people think I'm an alien interloper. Maybe everyone would be better off if we just stayed in our separate worlds. Is that what you want? Jackson asked, his heart hammering in his chest. Vera was quiet for a long moment, her luminescent skin flickering like a candle in the wind. I don't know what I want anymore, she admitted. All I know is that caring about you is causing pain to everyone around us, including yourself. She nodded, a single tear rolling down her cheek. Especially myself. Jackson wanted to argue, to fight for what he felt growing between them, but he could see how much she was hurting. Then maybe we should take a step back, he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Maybe they're right, and we're too different. Maybe we are, Vera whispered. As she walked away, her silver hair catching the light one last time before she disappeared into the crowd. Jackson felt something inside him break, not just his heart, though that was certainly part of it, but his newfound hope as well. Perhaps some bridges were simply too wide to cross, some differences too great to overcome. Standing alone in the plaza where his mother's memorial garden bloomed, Jackson wondered if he was destined to always lose the things that mattered most to him. First his mother, now Vera. Maybe it was time to accept that some flames were meant to burn alone. But as he turned to leave, he noticed something that made him pause. In the memorial garden, human and Etherian flowers grew side by side, their roots intertwined beneath the soil, their different colors creating something beautiful together. His mother had planted this garden, had believed that different species could coexist and support each other. Maybe, Jackson thought, it was time to honor that belief, not by giving up, but by proving that love could. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation in the plaza, and the silence between Jackson and Vera had become a living thing, painful, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. Jackson threw himself into his engineering work, spending 18-hour days maintaining the station's power grid and life support systems. The physical exhaustion helped numb the ache in his chest, but it couldn't completely silence the voice in his head that whispered. Her name, Vera, meanwhile, had retreated to the Etherian quarter, limiting her healing practice to her own people as the council had demanded. But the restriction felt like a cage, and every day that passed without helping those who truly needed her care made her luminescent skin grow dimmer with grief. It was Captain Thorne who brought them back together, though not in the way either would have chosen. The emergency klaxons began blaring at 03 for 7 hours, their piercing wail dragging Jackson from an uneasy sleep. He was already pulling on his work clothes when his communicator crackled to life. All engineering personnel to stations immediately, came the urgent voice of station control. We have multiple hull breaches in Sector 7. Repeat, multiple hull breaches. This is not a drill. Jackson's blood ran cold. Sector 7 housed the low-income residential unit's cramped quarters, where families who couldn't afford better accommodations made their homes. If the hull had been breached there, hundreds of lives were at risk. He raced through the corridors, joining a stream of emergency personnel heading toward the disaster zone. As he rounded the corner into Sector 7, the scope of the catastrophe became clear. A massive cargo freighter had suffered a navigation malfunction and slammed into the station's outer hull, tearing through the residential levels like a knife through paper. The scene was chaos. Emergency force fields flickered, unstably over gaping holes in the station's structure, barely holding back the vacuum of space. Debris floated in the low-gravity sections where artificial gravity generators had failed. And everywhere, people were trapped, injured, crying out for help. Captain Thorne, the station's gruff but competent security chief, was coordinating the rescue efforts with military precision. His scarred face was grim as he barked orders into his communicator. I need all available medical personnel to Sector 7 immediately. We've got critical injuries and not enough hands to treat them. What about the Etherian healers? Asked Kira Voss, the chief human medic, as she tended to a bleeding child. Their healing abilities could save dozens of lives. Thorne's expression darkened. The Etherian Council has forbidden their healers from treating humans. They're restricting their aid to their own people only. Jackson felt a surge of anger, but it was quickly replaced by determination. He grabbed Thorne's arm. Captain, I need to get to the Etherian quarter. Mercer, I need you here, Thorne replied, not looking up from his tactical display. The power grid in this section is failing. Without your expertise, we'll lose life support entirely. Give me 10 minutes, Jackson pleaded. There's someone who might be able to help. Thorne studied him for a moment, then nodded curtly. 10 minutes. Then I need you back here, or we're all dead. Jackson ran through the station's corridors faster than he'd ever run before, his repaired leg moving smoothly thanks to Vera's healing touch weeks ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was racing to ask for help from the woman, whose aid had been forbidden by her own people. He found Vera in her quarters, sitting by the window overlooking the damaged sector. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and he could see the anguish in her violet eyes as she watched the rescue efforts below. "Vera," he said, slightly out of breath, "I know things have been complicated between us, but people are dying down there. Children are dying." She turned to look at him, and he saw tears glistening on her cheeks. "Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I don't feel every life that's slipping away while I sit here, bound by the Council's commands? Then come with me," he said urgently. "Help me save them." "I can't," she whispered. "If I disobey the Council again, I'll lose everything, my position, my people, my place in Etherian society. I'll have nothing left." Jackson knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. Her skin was warm, pulsing with the healing energy she was forbidden to use. "You'll have something more important than any of that. You'll have the knowledge that you did what was right." "And what about us?" she asked, her voice breaking. "If I do this, if I defy the Council openly, there will be no going back. Any chance we might have had will be destroyed." "Maybe," Jackson admitted. "But what kind of chance did we really have if it was built on ignoring suffering? What kind of love could grow in the shadow of preventable deaths?" Vera closed her eyes, and for a moment, Jackson thought she would refuse. Then she stood, her luminescent skin beginning to glow brighter. "You're right," she said firmly. "Some things are more important than fear." They raced back to Sector 7 together, and Jackson felt his heart soar, despite the terrible circumstances. Whatever happened next, whatever consequences they would face them together. The scene in the damaged sector had grown worse in his absence. More debris had fallen, trapping additional victims. The emergency force fields were failing, and the acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air. Captain Thorne looked up. As they arrived, his expression grim. "Mercer, thank the stars you're back. We've lost power to the entire section. Without the environmental systems, we have maybe 20 minutes before the atmosphere becomes toxic." "I'm on it," Jackson replied, then turned to Vera. "The worst casualties are in the residential pod that took the direct hit. The human medics are overwhelmed." Vera nodded, already moving toward the injured. "I'll do what I can." What followed was the most intense 20 minutes of Jackson's life, while he worked frantically to reroute power and restore the environmental systems. He could see Vera moving among the wounded like an angel of mercy. Her hands glowed with healing light as she mended broken bones, sealed torn flesh, and pulled people back from the brink of death. The other human medics watched in amazement as injuries that should have required hours of surgery were healed in minutes. A little girl with a crushed leg walked again. An elderly man whose lungs had been punctured by debris breathed easily. A pregnant woman whose unborn child had been in danger delivered a healthy baby who glowed faintly with his mother's healing touch. But the effort was taking its toll on Vera. Each healing drained her, making her skin grow paler and her movements more labored. Jackson wanted to tell her to stop, to rest, but he knew she wouldn't listen. Not while there were still people who needed her help. The breakthrough came when Jackson managed to restore power to the main environmental processor. Fresh air began flowing through the damaged section, and the emergency lights flickered back to life. A cheer went up from the rescue workers, but their celebration was short-lived. "Incoming!" Someone shouted. Another piece of the damaged freighter was breaking away. A massive chunk of twisted metal that was heading straight for the section where Vera was working. She was so focused on healing a severely injured worker that she didn't see the danger approaching. Jackson didn't think. He just moved, diving across the debris-strewn floor and tackling Vera out of the way just as the metal crashed. Down where she had been standing, they tumbled together, and when they came to rest, she was lying beneath him, her violet eyes wide with surprise and something that made his heart race. Despite the danger they were in. "Thank you," she whispered, her breath warm against his face. "Thank you," he replied, meaning it with every fiber of his being. For everything. For a moment, the chaos around them faded away. There was only the two of them, two beings from different worlds who had found something precious in each other. Jackson wanted to kiss her, to seal the moment with all the tenderness he felt. But the sound of approaching footsteps broke the spell. Elder Nimder stood over them, his ancient face a mask of cold fury. Behind him were several other members of The Etherean Council, their expressions equally stern. "Vera Stormwind," he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, "you have defied the Council's direct orders." Vera struggled to her feet, her luminescent skin flickering with exhaustion. "I saved lives, Elder, innocent lives that would have been lost otherwise." "You contaminated yourself with human contact," Nimdr replied coldly. "You used sacred gifts for unworthy purposes. The Council is prepared to pronounce judgment." "Wait," Jackson said, stepping protectively in front of Vera. "If you want to punish someone, punish me. I'm the one who asked her to come here." "Oh, we know exactly who you are," Jackson Mercer, Elder Nimdr said with disdain. "Son of a thief, corrupter of innocence. Your influence over this young healer has been noted and will be addressed." "Influence?" Vera's voice was incredulous. "Elder Nimdr, no one influenced me. I made the choice to help because it was the right thing to do, because healing is my calling, not just for Ethereans, but for all living beings. And that choice," Nimdr replied, "has consequences." Before anyone could react, the Elder raised his hands, and a strange energy began to emanate from his fingers. Jackson recognized it from ancient texts of power that could sever an Etherean's connection to their healing abilities permanently. "No," Jackson lunged forward. But Captain Thorne caught his arm. "Don't," Thorne said quietly. The summons came 3 days after the disaster in Sector 7. Vera sat in her quarters, holding the formal notice from the Etherean Council with trembling hands. The elegant script, written in the flowing language of her people, was beautiful to look at but terrible in its meaning. She was to appear before the full council at the next moon cycle, to answer for her crimes against Etherean purity and tradition. A soft chime at her door announced a visitor. She expected it to be another council messenger, but instead found Jackson standing in her doorway, his face creased with worry. "I heard about the summons," he said gently. "How are you holding up?" Vera gestured for him to enter. Though she wasn't supposed to receive human visitors in the Etherean corridor at this point, one more violation hardly mattered. "I've been better," she admitted, setting the notice aside. "The Council has made their decision. They're going to strip me of my healing abilities and exile me from Etherean society." Jackson sat beside her on the low cushions that served as furniture in Etherean homes, his presence both comforting and heartbreaking. "There has to be something we can do, some way to fight this, fight the Council." Vera laughed bitterly. "They've ruled our people for 1,000 years. Their word is absolute." "Not if it's wrong," Jackson said firmly. "Vera, what you did in Sector 7 was heroic. You saved lives that would have been lost otherwise. How can they punish you for that?" Before Vera could answer, another presence made itself known. Ambassador Quinn, the station's diplomatic liaison, stepped through the doorway with the quiet authority that made her one of the most respected humans in the galaxy. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her dark eyes held the wisdom of someone who had spent decades navigating the treacherous waters of interspecies politics. "Forgive the intrusion," she said, inclining her head respectfully to both of them. "But I believe I might have some relevant information." Vera rose to greet the ambassador properly, surprised by the unexpected visit. "Ambassador Quinn, this is an honor, but I'm not sure what help you could offer in a matter of Etherean law." "More than you might think," Quinn replied with a slight smile. "You see, I've been doing some research into your mother's case, Jackson, and what I've discovered might change everything." Jackson's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of research?" Ambassador Quinn activated a small holoprojector, filling the room with floating documents and testimony records. "It took some digging, but I found the original investigation files from your mother's case, files that were apparently sealed and forgotten." She gestured to one particular document. "This is a testimony from Dr. Marcus Webb, the chief medical officer at the time of your mother's arrest." The holographic text expanded, showing a sworn statement that made Jackson's blood run cold. As he read it, according to Dr. Webb's testimony, the medical supply shortages that had led to Elena Mercer's desperate actions weren't due to budget constraints or administrative oversight. They were the result of deliberate sabotage by a consortium of pharmaceutical companies. Who wanted to drive up prices by creating artificial scarcity? My mother knew, Jackson whispered. The pieces finally falling into place. She knew it wasn't just about missing supplies. She knew people were being murdered for profit. More than that, Ambassador Quinn continued, bringing up another document. She had evidence, names, financial records, communication logs, everything needed to expose the conspiracy. But when she was arrested, that evidence conveniently disappeared. Vera leaned forward, her luminescent skin beginning to glow with excitement. You're saying she was silenced, that her arrest was orchestrated to cover up the real crime? Exactly, Quinn confirmed. And here's the most important part. One of the companies involved in the conspiracy was Helix Pharmaceuticals, owned by none other than Counselor Harwick's family. The revelation hit Jackson like a physical blow. Harwick had my mother arrested to protect his family's business interests. It gets worse, Ambassador Quinn said grimly. I found communication logs between Harwick and several members of the Etherian Council, including Elder Nimder. They've been coordinating their efforts to keep humans and Etherians separate, maintaining artificial barriers that serve their mutual interests. Vera's glow dimmed as the implications sank in. The Council's opposition to human-Etherian relationships. It's not about tradition or purity. It's about maintaining power. Political alliances, Jackson said, his voice heavy with disgust. They're using prejudice to protect their corrupt partnerships. Ambassador Quinn nodded. Harwick benefits from keeping the species separated because it prevents the kind of unified opposition that could expose conspiracies like the one that killed your mother, and Nimder benefits because it maintains the Council's authority over Etherian society. But why are you telling us this? Vera asked. What can we do with this information? The ambassador's smile was sharp as a blade. You can use it to save your people, both of your people, from leaders who care more about power than lives. She paused, studying their faces carefully. But it will require you to stand together, to refuse to be divided by their lies. That evening, as Vera prepared for her appearance before the council, Jackson found himself walking through his mother's memorial garden. The mixed flowers swayed gently in the artificial breeze. From the station's environmental systems, they're intertwined, roots hidden beneath the soil, but no less real for being unseen. She knew this day would come, said a voice behind him. Jackson turned to find Seer Talwyn, an ancient Etherian mystic who rarely left her meditation chambers. Her skin was so pale it was almost transparent, and her eyes held the milky quality of someone who saw beyond the physical world. Seer Talwyn, Jackson said respectfully, I didn't expect to see you here. Your mother planted these gardens, the seer said, moving to stand beside him. But more than that, she planted ideas, seeds of unity that have been growing in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to bloom. The council is going to destroy Vera, Jackson said bitterly. They're going to strip her of everything that makes her who she is. Are they? Talwyn asked, her voice carrying an odd note of amusement. Or are they simply revealing their own weakness? Before Jackson could ask what she meant, the seer continued. Power built on lies cannot stand against truth. Authority maintained through fear cannot survive love. Your mother understood this. That's why she accepted her fate not as an ending, but as a beginning. A beginning of what? Of change, Talwyn said simply. The council fears what you and Vera represent because you prove their lies wrong. You show that humans and Etherians can work together, love together, build something beautiful together. That terrifies them more than any weapon ever could. The next day, the council chambers were packed beyond capacity. Word of Vera's trial had spread throughout the station, and beings of every species had come to witness the proceedings. The formal accusations were read by Elder Nimder himself, his voice echoing through the vast chamber as he listed Vera's supposed crimes. Against Etherian tradition, Vera Stormwind, he intoned. You stand accused of contaminating your sacred gifts through contact with inferior beings. You have violated the ancient laws that keep our people pure and separate. How do you answer these charges? Vera stood in the center of the chamber, her luminescent skin steady and bright despite the weight of the moment. I answer with truth. Elder Nimder, I healed the sick and injured. Regardless of their species, I chose compassion over prejudice. If that is a crime, then I am guilty. Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. Many of the humans who had witnessed her actions in Sector 7 had come to support her, their presence a silent challenge to the Council's authority. "Then you accept the Council's judgment?" Nimdr asked. "You will submit to the severance of your healing abilities and accept permanent exile from Etherian society?" "I accept that you have the power to punish me," Vera replied carefully. "But I do not accept that what I did was wrong." That was when Jackson stood up from the gallery. "Before you pass judgment," he called out, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "there's something you should know about the real criminals in this case." Elder Nimdr's ancient face darkened with anger. "You have no voice in this chamber. Human, guards, remove this disruption." But Ambassador Quinn was already on her feet, her diplomatic credentials giving her the authority to speak. "Actually, Elder, Jackson Mercer has every right to present evidence relevant to these proceedings, evidence that I believe will be of great interest to everyone present." What followed was a masterclass in political theater. Ambassador Quinn systematically presented the evidence of the pharmaceutical conspiracy, the cover-up of Elena Mercer's murder, and the corrupt alliance between Councillor Harwick and members of the Hurrian Council. With each revelation, the mood in the chamber shifted, anger and outrage building among the assembled observers. When she finished, the silence was deafening. Elder Nimdr sat frozen in his ornate chair, his ancient face a mask of barely controlled fury. In the gallery, Councillor Harwick had gone pale, his political career crumbling before his eyes. "These are lies," Nimdr said finally, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "Fabrications designed to undermine the Council's rightful authority." "Are they?" asked Seer Talwyn, rising from her place among the sea.